I think this is the next big problem in this space. It's not a science and a tech problem anymore. I have great faith that the amazing scientists out there are going to solve those problems. Those are bioengineering problems, and those will be solved. This is an ecosystem infrastructure problem where we really need to be thinking about medicine in a different way. At my heart, in my core, I am a healer. And when I see people who are suffering in a way that I think something can be done about it, I can't help but want to help. I'm compelled. You know, I'm a 16-year cancer survivor. I was a patient too one day. And when I was diagnosed, all my doctor and, science mind flew out the window. It's very complex. This is not for the faint of heart.
At 17, I was diagnosed with a rare disease. And when my younger sister was diagnosed with the same, I was unwilling to accept that there was nothing we could do to treat ourselves. That's why I went on a decade-long journey to figure out what was possible. I'm developing my own gene therapy and helping others do the same for their conditions. This isn't just about the science, it's actually about the humanity and what happens when you tell people that there is something they can do. These sets of conversations on this podcast, Solving Rare Disease, will go through all of the different things that it takes to go from a diagnosis to a customized treatment for a rare disease. Action creates hope. This is the fundamental thing I've learned as a rare disease patient trying to treat my own disease and what I'm learning through many conversations with others doing the same. This is Solving Rare with me, Stevie Ringel. Hey, my name's Stevie Ringel. I'm a rare disease patient turned biotech builder, and I'm really pleased to be joined here today by Dr. Mimi Lee. Mimi has spent her entire career as a physician scientist, deeply thinking about what it means to bring innovative medicines to patients. Mimi, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to speak with you.
Thanks, Stevie. It's really great to be here.
You've done quite a lot in your career, from working at ARPA-H to working in industry to being a clinician. Just walk us through that path and what's the common thread from your perspective?
It's a great question. I think about this question a lot, and I think the critical piece of it is one that I realize about myself. At my heart, in my core, I am a healer. And when I see people who are suffering in a way that I think something can be done about it, I can't help but want to help. I'm compelled. And I think this is something that started when I was a little girl. My father was a psychiatrist, and when he passed, I realized how beloved he was by his patients. Patients came back who had been treated, parents of patients, and I appreciated that. And now I realize that whatever that was, I inherited. And I started out as a neurosurgeon, which really spoke to me because I could run around and literally save lives. And there was certainly an adrenaline thing to that, but it was also deeply, immensely, immediately gratifying. And when I ultimately ended up in genetic therapies development 10 years ago, it was a whole new world, learning about gene therapies. At the time, it was severe hemophilia, which I knew nothing about, and the rare community. And the rare community, I fell in love. I felt like I belonged somewhere that I might be able to make an impact in. The rare community is so invisible and unattended by systemic obstacles. And it was something that I felt, this feels like something I could really, really devote myself to. So that's how I got into it. And I ultimately went to ARPA-H when I realized the system's not ready for this yet. The science is amazing. In 2012 was the first gene therapy approval by Unicure. They let that patent go dry after they sold one product. And our product, Roctavian, was approved and commercialized. It was a failure. And I ultimately ended up at Advocacy, which had a success with Zolgensma and is saving babies. But that was a rocky road to get that. And the rest of, I had 2 more rare disease gene therapies under my my purview, and those both got canceled too because they weren't going to make peak forecast sales. So it really drove home, as a physician, we're not business people, and I don't live for money, I live for purpose. But I really learned, there are all these forces happening that are not evil in and of themselves. Every component of the system is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing it well. but it's unfortunately put patients as an unfortunate side product of the whole machinations of the thing. And so that drove me to join the federal government and try to see if I could create something that leveraged the core technology that's so revolutionary if you think about medicine, in order to re-incentivize all of the system stakeholders to work together in a new and different way that actually put patients back into the center of the equation. And that was the whole impetus for doing that. Wow. I'm proud of the program that I originally designed.
Wow. Yeah, it's an amazing journey. Clearly you've learned a lot. What, at this moment in 2026, has made you recognize that it's time for patient-centric, patient-led medicine in a different model, like versus 10, 11, 12 years ago when you were working on some of those products? It feels like a different era, but I'm curious if you'd agree and how you'd quantify that.
The science has gone very, very fast. The evolution of genetic technologies for medicines has been rapid in evolution. When we were doing gene replacement therapies with AAV, wild type AAVs, that was very, very Gen 0.1. And things were coming down quickly. And when we were in the government, we realized we actually need to be using design thinking, solving the problem backwards. In the future, we'll all be treated as genomically unique individuals. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you get labeled by the empirical label of having a rare disease, which is different in every region, right? So it's not even a universal thing when you say rare disease. It's a continuum. And I think in the future, we'll all get to enjoy a genome for life that can be reanalyzed or resequenced at any time. But that genome for life is the risk roadmap for each of us, so that individuals, their families, their teams could just keep an extra eye out for things that were on the map. It's not a guarantee that you're going to get to A, B, C, or D destination, but there are things that we can look at. It's just another tool in medicine that we didn't have before. And the biotechnologies that are coming down the pike, and had a privilege of seeing so many, and I'm afraid that I've missed a lot in the last 6 months since I left the agency because they're going so quickly. Yeah. But we will get to, I believe, programmable, precise gene replacement insertions very, very quickly, and nanoparticles, everything that can be manufactured in a distributed way, cell-free, synthetic manufacturing on desktop machines. We're going to be able to scale this globally. Wow. And we'll start with people who are ignored by the system right now, people with very, very small populations.
I mean, it's a beautiful vision and mission. From your vantage point, what does it actually take to get this very rapid pace of innovation to equally distribute to many patients? What does it take to close the gap between vision and reality?
I think this is the next big problem in this space. It's not a science and a tech problem anymore. I have great faith that the amazing scientists out there are going to solve those problems. Those are bioengineering problems, and those will be solved. This is an ecosystem infrastructure problem where we really need to be thinking about medicine in a different way. And so, I think a lot about drug development. I've done that for 10 years. And when we think of drug development, we start with the candidate drug. And then we, so there's blue sky research, identify a target, try to drug the target, and develop that. Then we whittle down the distribution of patients with a specific disease that might be eligible for this investigational drug. We cherry pick the crap out of them so that the eligibility and eligibility criteria only looks at a slice of patients. And as a doctor, I know I can do a day full of clinics. You see the same diagnosis over and over again all day, hypertension all day long. No two patients are the same.
Right.
Hemophilia taught me this. No two people living with hemophilia are the same. Mm-hmm. They present very differently, even though they may have the same exact mutation. And so I think part of the problem is we only really know what 5% of the genome does. The protein encoding regions. What you're working on, what others are working on, will fill in the knowledge gaps that exist right now. we don't know how the human body works in the systems level. We know like 5% of human biology. We've gone very, very reductionist down to now the genomic level. But what we will learn when we look at patients over time, and if we think of each patient as an operating system, you have one, I have one, our cameraman has one, we will all react differently to a perturbation of that system. And as we measure that beforehand, look at the perturbation, which might be a genetic modification, and afterwards, we will learn how the genome works in concert. And we will learn about systems biology. And once we learn more and more of that, then we will be able to hone the engine so that we can get to truly being predictive and preventative in a, for all individuals.
Makes total sense. I mean, when I hear systems design at that level, I think SpaceX, I think NVIDIA GPUs or TSMC chip fabs. Like, I think really big, frankly expensive programs in order to put all of the system components under a roof where they can indeed be coordinated with the world's best people. I imagine that's part of the thinking why you spend some time in the government is thinking about where could there be pockets of capital that could actually invest that way. Help us understand, to actually get to where you're talking about, where innovation reaches patients, what is the scale of investment needed? And maybe one way to think about that is how many different component pieces are we talking about here that have to coordinate between one another?
It's very complex. This is not for the faint of heart. And from the get-go, I think it requires design thinking at a global level.
What does that mean?
So it means, for example, I talk to a lot of ministries of health who have their own, most countries outside of the US have their own databases, and they have, some countries have newborn screening for all their patients, and that they are looking forward. Now we have everyone screened, now what are we gonna do? Right. And so, and we have these technologies. So I think, the way I'm thinking about it is having virtually networked institutes, so virtual institutes, and where we can get the experts who are experts in, look, if you have a really, really great nail and I have a really great screwdriver, but then we both need to become house developers, we have to do a transaction and we've got to do a joint venture and whatever, and then we might need, hammers as well, and then we've got to do this. So I'm thinking, can we have a collaborative system, shared collaboration, where, in regulatory terms, we can share non-clinical, clinical, and manufacturing, so that new tools are more rapidly de-risked before they have to commit to large markets. Yeah. Right now, they have to commit to these large markets and be asset development companies. Most of them will fail because of this pesky thing called the human system, about which we know very little. So I think there's a new way, and I think now's a really great time to try to model how we work, not isolated from one institution versus another institution and another, and not just one region versus another region. I think we will see regions that are not necessarily, from a commercial standpoint, the top tier commercial markets to go for, but there are markets where the leaders in the country understand that they can actually leapfrog countries like ours. Yeah. By being organized and designing this from the get-go. It's really interesting.
Well, it's certainly true also in regions that have concentrations of rare disease. For example, in the Middle East, there's 7 times the amount of autosomal recessive rare disease, just given how those populations have emerged over time. Same thing, you look at the first data set that was ever really commercially built and sold, which was Decode, bought by Amgen back 15 years ago, and where was that? It was in Iceland, right? Because you had kind of a captured population that stayed on the island for a very long period of time. So I think we've certainly seen in rare genetic medicines the power of a population trying to treat itself. And I think to draw down further on that, you've seen regulators become more okay with allowing things that are experimental. And as a result, innovative companies, at least the ones I'm talking to every day, are thinking about the value of getting their platform or into a human and getting the data back from that as a strategy that actually works in the boardroom, which on one hand is really great. On the other hand, some might flip that around and say, does that make patients test subjects? How do we think about balancing the fact that we want to incentivize and encourage these companies with the latest and greatest technologies to treat their own populations, while at the same time making sure that what we bring patients is safe with a reasonable chance of efficacy. Like, as a clinician, how do you think about navigating that trade-off, and what data would you want to look at in order to do so?
It's a great question and a really important topic. And you know, I thought about back in the day when I did practice neurosurgery or even anesthesia. I had these conversations with patients every day.
Wow.
I can't guarantee what the outcome will be.
Right.
Based on all of the objective data I have about your condition and what I'm observing and what you tell me, I'm going to give you my recommendation. I can't tell you that if you choose option A, B, or C, it's going to turn out the way you want. But I can tell you if it were me or if it was someone in my family, this is what I would recommend. And I think that is something that used to be very, one of the coolest things about being a doctor, because you could have these very, very intimate relationships with your patients, where without that trust that I was giving you the right information or all the information I knew, even if some of it was difficult to hear, patients could feel, you know, I can't tell you the number of times that patients just died because they had strokes or things that were non-salvageable, but they still had expressed so much gratitude.
Sure.
And then back in the day, I used to think, wow, how could you be so grateful to me? I didn't do anything and your loved one still died. But I think that goes into, you know, on a one-off level, if you're holding hands with the patients in partnership, if you have them at the helm, at the table when decisions are being made. You know, I always was a little bit disturbed in companies because we would make decisions and then we would inform the patient groups of our status, just because, like an FYI, we took all their data and everything they could possibly give us. And then when we had to cancel programs for corporate strategic reasons, we just pieced out. It felt horrible. And it was one of the reasons in the original Thrive program, I mandated that patients had to be at the design table to come up with what are we going to do and be in the rooms where hard decisions are being made. Should we do this? Should we do that? Why or why not? So I think that you have to include patients right from the get-go. And look, medicine has historically done terrible things to populations of patients. And I think we have to admit that as a field, and we have to have those conversations of, let's talk about how do we all avoid doing that again. Now, to flip things on the positive side, I see this as a perfect storm. We have now genomic diagnostics, we've got genetic biotechnologies to fix modified genes, we've got crazy compute capacities and AI that's just growing exponentially every day, and the things we can do with it. And then we've got 450 million people around the world who need help today, now. So I think that this momentum all together is what's going to help us drive us into a future, and it's a different system than what we're experiencing today. And the general patient knows that the system today doesn't work.
Right.
So I think it feels a little bit like an underground revolution, but it's not so underground anymore. This is a movement.
It's so real. And I mean, as a patient myself, first, thank you for including patients plural at the table, because even within a family, like my sister and I have different views on risk and benefit and what we would be interested in dosing ourselves for vision loss. So I think there is heterogeneity. You can't just have one patient in the room and say, we talk to the patients, singular. You really do have to engage holistically. So I'm really glad that you're doing that. I will also say that I think the rare disease patient community is really open to sharing data, right? Because they want that help, but also really resourceful in using the next generation of tools like AI to look stuff up themselves. There's opportunities and challenges within that. You kind of mentioned the bedside conversations that you've been having. Now those include Gemini or Claude or OpenAI, right? Like there's just a different level of patients looking up stuff, whether it's right or wrong online, that was always there with Dr. Google. It's just gone to the next level. And at the same time, those same tools might really help some people in the ways that you're describing. And I think this is a conversation we're hearing around the country right now, way outside of medicine, around is AI a net positive or a net negative? And I'm curious, based on your experience as a clinician and your experience as a builder of ecosystems with these tools, like how do you navigate that nuance of where AI might get in the way of some of this work, but also where AI might accelerate it. Your thoughts?
Wow, I think that it's going to be a rocky road. Dr. Google was always painful to deal with, just like marketing and advertisement was painful to deal with. But it's a way. I see if I'm being optimistic, I see that as a good sign that patients are engaged and looking things up. I'm a 16-year cancer survivor. I was a patient too one day.
Right.
And when I was diagnosed, all my doctor, science mind flew out the window. I was online. I went on the internet and looked stuff up. And it's a terrible place to be because the information is so unreliable. And I think, if we go back to thinking, we only actually know like 5% of human biology and 5% of how the genome works. If you think about music, if you think of a band, we've got like someone, hitting a wall, like making a beat over there, somebody like singing some notes over here. There's no written song, like there's nothing written down. There's not like music happening yet. We're kind of in that stage right now in terms of understanding functional genomics at scale and how it defines the body. So I think, AI, we use that term very loosely, but looking at different, evolutions, like Basecamp is sequencing everything in nature, not humans, all species, plants,
right.
Whatever they can get their hands on to try to look at patterns of evolution. And that's one way versus like designing with AI, designing recombinases and things like that we saw with Profluent. I think that it's going to be learning from multiple different angles at once versus traditional science, which is very kind of left to right and very rational and iterative. I think we're going to see big step change understandings, and we're going to accelerate learning and filling in those gaps of what we don't know. So I think it's a tough time, but we're all learning together, and we all have to put the pieces together.
You mentioned kind of the different verticals, the different ways that AI will kind of maybe come together and create an orchestra. I mean, a lot of that's a function of data, right? I mean, we've always thought about AI being as good as the compute, the frontier models, and the data, and we all know that in healthcare data is sparse, missing, and poor. The interesting thing about rare disease and patients is that patients are very willing, to your point, to share their data because they do not have other options, right? And they're looking for something that might help them, and therefore they're, honestly, despite HIPAA laws being written in a way to most protect them, they're the most cavalier in saying, I actually want to give you my data, of course, within proper consent. But it seems like there's an opportunity here because there is a freedom of movement and a desire to generate individual data and track everything in the rare disease community, where rare could actually leapfrog and be the swiftest moving current in turning the promise of AI into the reality of medicines. Have you experienced any of that as you've talked to patients and other organizations around how the rare disease ecosystem looks different in the era of AI and the potential there?
That's interesting. So I have two different perspectives on this.
Yeah.
One is, yes, rare patients are, and I get it, they're looking for help. So of course they're going to give everything away, and that makes sense. I think that disease is so complex. And rare patients are so uniquely different. They're more different from each other or from the average, normal, non-rare patient than other individuals are from each other. So I think the data we collect from the rare will certainly inform us tremendously. However, I think that it's going to be, it's all the outliers. It's that data is going to needs to be complemented by non-rare data to understand human systems holistically so that we can understand what's different about rare. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I think it leads naturally into like an investment question, which I don't mean like, what's the core thesis of a venture capital bet? But I mean, if you were thinking about this from an ecosystem perspective, what's the first step? Like with that view, where do you actually put time, effort, and resources first to build towards that knowledge?
So one of the things that I was working on at ARPA, and I'd love somebody to fix this outside, is to federate the data. And, globally with local, regional governances, because the data economy that has built where you transact CSV files seems like an old way of doing business. And you're only looking at siloed pieces. But imagine the amount of open science and questions that could be asked of federated data. So that's one. One is I always pause because rare patients are so free with their data. And I think that's not going to be scalable to the average patient.
Yeah, of course.
Because average patients don't want to give up all their data. So wouldn't it be great if in the future data actually centered around each of us as individuals? And we have the technology to do that. That's a policy, that is something that we, I think, as humanity need to demand. And that way we can all individually get invited into the data economy because we can direct our funds. We can have genome wallets. We can have health wallets that we own. And we're not the ones going out to all the places where our data sits in order to then give it. I mean, we've created all these secondary, tertiary, quaternary markets because we've valued the data. But we don't need that anymore. You can actually just query data. So I'd love for that architecture to be built from the get-go. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of seeing it's hard to bolt things on to the way things exist right now. I would love for, the rare community and all the other stakeholders to be sitting around a table like, okay, let's just start with a clean whiteboard. What could it look like? And what that looks like will shape and form how we all get treated as individuals moving forward, which is what everybody wants.
To do that work, you certainly need a conductor of the orchestra. I know that you mentioned music before and that you named a recent organization you started, Opus 132. So tell us about the inspiration for the name and then how that connects to your view of how these pieces need to come together.
Opus 132 was Beethoven's penultimate string quartet. He wrote 16. And the 15th he wrote after he recuperated from a GI problem that he thought he was going to die from. And so he himself had subtitled it Gratitude to the Deities from a Convalescent.
Nice.
It is one of the most just tremendously moving, I think, pieces where you can feel the heavens opening and just pouring of gratitude and love coming out of it. And it's heavy, it's intense, it's a long movement, but it's one that spoke to me because it's, when you overcome something you never applied for, you never hope to get, be a member of, something so personal and intimate as, an existential, potentially threatening diagnosis. And you realize one day you're going to live. I had that experience. It's a feeling that I related to and a feeling that I really love sharing with patients who I can help maybe move over to that other side of complexity.
Feeling that you're going to survive something, I think, really captures probably the emotional state of what it means to be in any health journey, but especially a rare disease journey where there's a lot less knowledge and data, a lot more uncertainty and fear, and a lot more loneliness from parents and patients. So I really love and appreciate the spirit. What does that mean in practice? How do you translate that emotional resonance of what you want to create into that whiteboard? And how do you get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I get so much inspiration from the rare community, especially from people like you, because it's really hard to recover from something as devastating as a diagnosis that can change your life. There's before diagnosis and after diagnosis, life is very, very different, and some get stuck. But if you can then use it for inspiration to do something to help other people, that's really, really exciting. I think to get there, right now I'm trying to think, yes, we need big money. I'm trying to figure out how do we get big aligned donors to really understand This is a public health crisis now today,
Ooh, okay.
and it's global.
Wait, say more there. Like, why is this a crisis? I don't hear that word very often in rare
It's,
disease.
you know, depending on the numbers that you read, 300, 450 million people around the world. That's a lot. That's 7% of the global population. If you think about it in terms of, you know, I think we talked about this. Is it a nonprofit? Is it a public benefit? Is it a for-profit?
Yeah.
Is it venture? Is it impact, social philanthropy? It's all of those things because in the end, it affects all of us. The costs of having a rare disease are really burdensome on an individual family level, and then you scale that for all the other stakeholders in the ecosystem. I think that we will see costs go down and health outcomes baseline levels go up, which means if you're really into longevity and all that stuff, that should automatically come with it. But we'll all get to enjoy better health. I think to start right now, I'm obsessed with trying to find the right money that will understand that this is how we change healthcare between now and 25 years from now. So, you know, one of the first places I thought of recently was Kaiser. When Kaiser first started here in San Francisco, I don't know, 40 years ago, maybe, we were all scratching our heads, like this preventative systems model, you know, but I think that maybe they were the ones to leap into the future. They've got infrastructure, brick and mortar, but then you add on top of that the types of infrastructure with the various integrated vertical stacks of technologies in compute, AI, and genomic medicines for that population. It's part of preventative medicine. I think you're doing it. You start with patients that are diagnosed. You figure out what could be used to treat them. You figure out what exists now. You figure out what is needed to treat tricky ones. We will learn how other parts of the genome are controlling volume up, volume down expression or non-expression of genes. We will, you know, it's just cranking that machine around and around and figuring out who are the first team to do it, and then how do we grow and get more teams involved. There's multiple different modes of technologies that are coming down. It's going to be standard of care, and how do we push towards not you know, I don't think the value will be in individual drugs like they are right now in the current pharma model. It'll be in the process. So once you have a process down, you've shown blank plus blank modality works X number of times, you're able to do that reliably, then we will have a number of platforms or processes that can be scaled and distributed around the world. And this will be something that can be accessible to anyone where they live.
And so when you go to those pockets of patient capital and you talk to them about a 25-year plan, what do you point to over the next 2, 3, 4 years that demonstrate we're on track?
So I actually point to things that have already happened and things that are happening now. It's already happening. Baby KJ, of course, huge mainstream, but there's quite a few N of 1 therapies that have already come across the line. It can be done. And I think it's finding a way to incentivize hospital systems, payers, insurers, big pockets of cash that right now are operating on very, very slim margins, and getting them to see, oh, this is another way we can do things in the future. Interestingly, you know, big pharma is one. Lilly's a really interesting place. They were kind of last to the game of rare and genetic therapies, but they're here at a good time in terms of all the technologies coming down. So I think that you know, the companies that know that if they build the future, the infrastructure, then all of the science and the drugs that they're making will have a much easier path. We've seen so many drugs fail. Even the sickle cell ex vivo therapy, that's only sold like 50 units. It's commercially very challenged.
I imagine when you go talk to the people that you're mentioning, whether they're in academia or in government or at large pharma companies, there's probably a lot of excitement for this vision, right? It sounds phenomenal for patients, for industry, for future economics. What's the core pushback that you get, if any, about why timing might not be right or what needs to get de-risked in order for more people to come into this fight?
Gosh, if I knew the answer to that question. Everybody loves the vision.
Sure.
I think everybody gets the vision. Everybody loves the vision.
Yep.
I love the underdog, but this is like the ultimate underdog story. We are in a dinghy. You've got to know how to use duct tape and row and get the water out of the boat at the same time. They're big tankers around us. It's stormy and the waves are high. So this is, I think right now, the current business model is quite robust. There's hundreds of billions of dollars that swirl around in this business, in this ecosystem. And the entities that are doing their jobs well are doing well. Sadly, patients suffer the most. And if we can, when we first started thinking about gene therapies for Roctavian, we did the market planning and all of that, and I remember having a payer ad board, and a small payer group was like, if you charge us at like $1 million, I know how I have 3 patients. I'm never going to be able to afford this. And another one was like, I'm part of Medicaid in California. If you charge it whatever you want, I don't want our names on the cover of the LA Times. It's a very change is hard. Change triggers fear. Change, and without really being able to see and understand the future, I think is very, very difficult for people to wrap their head around. I think we need to do a better job where we have an opportunity to tell the story in a way that the lay public can understand. Conversations like, you know what, we just have these new tools. It's kind of like when x-rays came around or CT scans came around or MRIs came around. Guess what? Now we have genomes, like really medical grade genomes, and we're going to understand a lot more about how we can look at the genome at diseases at the genomic level and treat that with one-off interventions, which is a completely different business model. It's, I know a lot of institutions are now thinking about building their own genetic surgery centers or interventional surgery clinics. In the Thrive program, they were called interventional genetics clinics, I think. But with that model, can we all kind of agree upon what will be the standards, what will be the expectations, what can patients expect, what can hospitals expect? Can we build that ecosystem together across entities so that we're not stuck with a hyper-fragmented, siloed system like we are now?
Yes, we need to do that. So we talk about this future business model. There's 2 sides of that coin, revenues and costs. This costs a lot of money to get started, and the revenues aren't here yet. They're in the future. How do we make sure that as we build this infrastructure and this new wave of medicine, that it's not only getting to the wealthiest individuals that can afford it?
Yeah. We want everyone to be able to afford it. We want societies to be able to afford this. So again, if we think about it like, if we think the current pharma model of we made this great drug, come and get it. This one-size-fits-all great drug, come and get it.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the case in this. When we're looking at really bespoke, individualized solutions for patients and their individual systems, then we're looking at processes. So if you think about, surgical interventions, ambulatory surgery centers, surgeons, we do the same procedure. It's called the same thing. It's coded the same thing, but no 2 patients are exactly the same.
Sure.
And I think the payment system will be different. I've actually had conversations with, ICER and other kind of thought policy leaders on novel payment potentials. And if we think of the whole experience end to end as a bundled set, you come in, you're diagnosed, you get you figure out what therapy you need, you have that made, we have a collaboration tool, we have pooled risk and pooled resources where we can actually make the medicines and then administer the medicines. Ideally we're getting down to $100,000 for a medicine, or maybe even $10,000. I think we're going to exponentially drop zeros as we crank this engine around and around. And overall, it's going to save payers money because it's going to decrease utilization. It's going to raise outcomes and health spans at a baseline, because we're going to have those risk roadmaps a priori, and we'll know when to intervene at the right time. So I think overall, the current costs of a single drug development, an average $2.3 billion for a rare disease drug, that is going to be a thing of the past, where we're going to look back and say, gosh, can you believe we even got to that? And then most of them were commercial failures. We're going to be thinking in the future, we're going to be like, oh yeah, today we did 10 interventions and for 10 different individuals with 10 different bespoke solutions. And that was a great day. And that's happening all over the world.
You know, the failure point is something that is really interesting, because we think about, the reason it takes $2.5 billion to get a drug to market is because there's so many preclinical and clinical trial stage failures, and that's Eroom's law, the reverse of Moore's law, right? That it's getting harder and harder to get a large population drug to market successfully. But the other part of failure that I don't think anyone talks about is that, like, oftentimes we get a drug to market, congratulations, it's approved, people start writing scripts on it, and the bar and the evidence sharing around, post-market approval data, very diverse, often doesn't really make it into the lexicon of the average dosing clinician. And so we have approvals, yet there's not actual success in outcome benefit and cost reduction for the patients that are getting those therapies. And this is true of any therapy, right? I mean, it could be Lipitor, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be an advanced therapy. And so it's really interesting to think about in a personalized medicine world. Do you think it's potentially possible that the hit rate, if you do 10 interventional genetic surgeries in a day, that 8 of the 10 or 9 of the 10 are going to actually yield outcomes and cost reduction versus 5 or 6 in the traditional model? Like, is that part of the hidden calculus here?
Yes, this is a great point. Current drugs, again, cherry-picked for a very isolated profile, an archetypal patient profile, an idealized patient.
Yeah.
That's who you make the drug
The
for.
median, homogeneous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And nobody actually looks like that. And not everybody benefits. And, you only need to show a pretty low bar of efficacy, and everybody else doesn't benefit, but that's okay. The drug is still approved for marketing and to be sold. I think when you're targeting therapies at the genomic level for individual patients, the hit rate's going to be, hopefully we get to a place where it's 100%.
Wow, 100%. That's incredible, because if you think about that, the amount of what I'll call like drug cost prescription waste is huge. We know from studies like what Every Life did in 2022 that 60% of direct care costs come from being not treated, at least in the settings like neurology. So you get another kind of click of the arrow there on cost reduction. And we know that a lot of the kind of cost to actually develop these drugs will come way down at scale. Back of the envelope, it seems $60 to $70 billion could treat millions of patients, not $2.5 billion per drug. So it seems like all these math points actually really line up. What concerns me, being an American, is that our healthcare system is uniquely unqualified and malaligned with getting this done, especially when it comes to gene therapies, things that are single dose. Mm-hmm. And it concerns me that we might get left behind in terms of access. Have you had conversations inside and outside the government or with other governments around what does it actually take to get single administration therapies to people and paid for the right way, given that there's so much cost benefit? Like, how do we actually get the first dose done?
It concerns me quite a bit. And I've actually had conversations where people talk about the medical tourism that will rise of people wanting to get their genetic therapies in places like China or even India. And I see that as a very real potential future. I think what we need to do, and we'll need everybody's help, is again, to organize amongst ourselves and to figure out, okay, we can't bolt this onto a system that was designed for repetitive, lifelong drugs. I do take a form of a statin every day, and I'm going to have to take it for the rest of my life.
Sure.
Never going to wean off of that, but that's the business model.
Right.
And so this doesn't fit into the current business model. So what do we need to do? I was asked once on a panel about a year ago, how do we fit this into our system now? And I laughed and I said, we don't.
Yeah.
We're going to have to show that a new system can work. And once we show that it works and people are doing better and it's cost savings, then people will change. I think people are going to realize if we can demonstrate it, the early adopters, which is the rare community, we have to treat the rare community. They have the highest unmet medical needs. I mean, that's just a responsibility for the medical community to do. And yes, there's the business of medicine and healthcare, and it's super fragmented, and there's layers and layers and layers of administration on top of it. But we can simplify the whole thing and show that it works.
I mean, I totally hear you. If I can ask you a personal question, I mean, what you just described is audacious at best, right? You just talked about building a completely new healthcare system. You might as well have said walking on Mars, not just the moon. On a personal level, like, obviously you're called to be a healer, but when you are fighting every single day to bring about a completely new system, it's got to get hard. What helps you motivate to keep moving forward?
It's people like you. People in the community who have experienced something unique and not common, who then have harnessed whatever knowledge, skills, education, outlooks, and whatever, that inspires me. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of times I'm thinking I could have a much easier life.
Yeah, this is crazy, right?
I could have a much easier life.
Yeah.
But life, I feel it's given me also a very grounded, centered purpose and an ability for me to understand more about myself. I am a healer. I don't know that I would have said that with such just confidence 20 years ago. I think I was a very good doctor, but I didn't conceive of myself as something like that. And now I realize that that's just who I am. That's how I entered this world. And I happen to have skills and experiences and all these kind of things that I can apply to a community that I think deserves it.
Well, maybe we are super lucky to have you fighting for our community and thinking about the whole orchestra and a brand new system, and that you're healing our community. And I really genuinely appreciate your friendship and your perseverance in fighting the good fight.
Thank you. I can't do anything on my own, Stevie, so I'm looking forward to working with everybody in the community. I think much stronger together than any of us are alone.
We will happily listen to your baton wave, and hopefully together Rare will get us there. To steal your words.
Rare will get us there. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.